All right, Genesis 14. I gotta say, it's been kind of a long day. I got home and I started working on my tax return. I get early because I have a pretty common name and I've had my identity stolen before, so I don't do the online stuff usually anymore. Unfortunately, it gets more complicated. Excuse me. Let's get started. Genesis 14. Genesis chapter 14, verse 1. This is actually, chapter 14 is the War of the Kings. It's the first war really mentioned in the Bible. Shows Abraham's tactics. It's still Abram at the time, actually. And he goes and rescues Lot. We'll get into the tactics. A lot of this stuff is actually still studied. I mean, more stuff in the Bible studied later on as far as military tactics than Abram here. But it is very tactical, and I get into that because that stuff is fascinating to me. I'll get into the geography a little bit, but that's just not my forte. I do love geography, but I hate trying to find what the ancient location of it was every time. And most people know that stuff or can look it up if they're passionate enough to know. Verse 1, And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, which is Iran, Arioch, king of Elazar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations. So there's the four kings. I like how Tidal's king of nations. It took me a while to find that, and the most concise thing I could find is just he was the leader of a group of Gentiles. So a bunch of people, I guess, no belief or different beliefs, completely separate of any of these other nation states or whatever. So Gentiles, basically, and it's believed that this Tidal's group became the Hittites later on, which actually were a pretty powerful civilization for a brief time. All right, so Shinar is Iran, Elazar is Asia Minor, Elam is modern-day Khuzestan, Khuzestan, and then the King of Nations. Verse 2. That these four kings made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemabar, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. It doesn't say his name, so either he was very wicked and they didn't want to include it, or is very well known. Or that, they're pretty good record keepers, so I think they knew the name. Most likely he's pretty wicked. I couldn't find anything about Zoar, but I'm wondering if this is where Zoroastrianism, the religion of Zoroastrianism, I think that's how you say it, originates or comes from or is named after that. I think it's most likely. That's an interesting religion to look into for sure. It's a lot of copy. They say Christians copied Zoroastrianism, but when you really start studying it's the reverse quite clearly, and they stretch for interpretations to make it look so. People are always trying to make Christianity look bad, even though it keeps getting proved right over and over again. It's like you're embarrassing yourselves, but don't argue with a fool. Verse 3. All these were joined together in the Vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. Alright, so this is where they made battle, basically. And then they're going to get into the description of what led up to the battle here. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer. This was the king of Elam, Asia Minor. And in the 13th year they rebelled. So the 5 kings rebelled against the 4, basically. This Chedorlaomer is the one they rebelled against, basically. He must have been kind of like they were all paying homage to him. And so he gets these other 3 kings, so they're the 4 kings. Basically, he's going to get them and go after these people who rebelled. So for 12 years, they're paying homage to this king Chedorlaomer of Elam, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaims in Ashtaroth Karnaim, and the Zuzims in Ham, which must be named after Ham, I'm guessing, son of Noah, and the Emins in Sheva Kiriathaim, and the Horites in their Mount Seir unto El Paran, which is by the wilderness. Okay, so basically, they come and they wipe the floor with these rebels. They wait for a year while they're rebelling, and remember, news traveled not as quickly. It's a smaller area, but they also had to prepare for war. So they called their banners, they made a strategy, they got supplies, did all the logistics. So this is strategic in and of itself. They're rebelling for a year, but really their main rebellion was just that they stopped paying homage. It doesn't sound like they were raiding or anything like that. They just weren't giving tribute to this king anymore. And they probably were building up their own forces to get ready for this, because they had to know that this was coming. All right, verse 7. Right here. And they returned and came to En-Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and they smote all the country of the Amalekites. Remember that they're actually the chief tribe of the Canaanites, is what most historians believe, and the Amorites that dwelt in Hazeram Tamar. So again, this king, how do you say this again? Chedorlaomer. Let's call him Chad. Yeah, let's call him Ched, actually. Ched brings his 3 allies to the 4 kings and just wipes the floor with all these. And we mentioned the Raphaims, the Amalekites, the Amorites. These were tribes that were known to have giants in them. So the Raphaim literally does translate as giants. Now, there's so many interpretations of what this means. Are they somehow descendants of the Nephilim? Or did the Nephilim come back? We talked about the breath of life and what that meant after the flood. There's all kinds of theories. One that I tend to think is because they were doing very dark practices. We won't really get into it until Leviticus, but these people were doing disgusting things. We'll get into it when we get to Sodom and Gomorrah also, and I did in my last video, but they were not practicing worship of God. They were practicing dark stuff. And whether you believe in that or not, it's up to you. But I think more than likely what was happening is because of this dark magic, things were happening to them and creating their giants here. I think that's the most likely thing that I can think of. Raphaim also refers to in those who are cursed, the fallen angels cursed in hell. So I wonder, these giants, sometimes because of all the dark sacrifices that they're making, I'm curious if it doesn't refer to the Raphaim spirits taking hold of these people who live in this tribe, and somehow, through sacrifices and stuff, and it changes them. Even when we talked about Nimrod, that's how he became a mighty man of old. So if you're calling up these spirits, and there's good documentaries out there actually about the Phoenicians, who were the Canaanites in the island of Sardinia, and how they would sleep in the tombs of these giants to get their spirits. And of course, you can believe what you want about whether or not that works, but that's what they believe. And archaeological evidence supports that there are some huge dudes who were pretty agile looking. So however these giants and stuff are existing, these are the people that this King Chedorlaomer is just wiping the floor with. Now, this doesn't mean that this Chedorlaomer, Chad, whatever, is a good guy necessarily, but he's wiping the floor with these giants. And remember, these are the people who inhabit the land that Abraham is about to inherit. So a lot of his enemies are being taken out, not by him. Remember that for the military strategy. So yeah, he just went on a tear, this King Ched. Verse 8. And there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, the same as Zoar, and they joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim, with Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings with 5. So the war with 4 kings and 5. So this is after he's bringing his army through and he's just wiping these Amorites and Rephaim and Amalekites, just wiping the floor with them. So the kings of these, in their own rights, maybe they're, we might think of them more as lords or kings of a city-state or something, barons, whatever you want to call them. They join together, these 5 of them, and are going to meet this King Ched and his buddies in the land of, or in Siddim, the Vale of Siddim. And verse 10, the Vale of Siddim was full of slime pits. I kept looking what slime pits meant exactly. I don't know for sure. Okay, so I'm sorry on that one. Alright. And the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there, and they that remained fled to the mountains. So slime pits somehow or something, fall to your death with a cliff, quicksand, I'm not sure. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their victuals and went their way. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. So remember, Lot and Abram had split ways, and he was living in the plain of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So then this King Ched comes in and does battle against the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah and a few other places. It just demolishes them. I mean, his army was hurt too, so remember that. But he beats them, and he takes the riches with. I mean, that's common practice a lot, especially since the reason you're fighting this war is because they didn't pay you tribute like they're supposed to. So now you're going to take the tribute, and they take slaves. And Lot was a wealthy man, so they took his possessions and his ownings with him. And they may have also realized that he wasn't. Well, actually, what more than likely they just didn't care whether they knew that he was not of Sodom and Gomorrah. They probably just like, whatever, you're living here, it's our stuff now. Verse 13. And there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and the brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Abram. So these guys have an alliance already. This is where Abram set up camp. He's probably met with these 2 guys. He knows who they are, and they're good neighbors. More than likely, they probably still worship God. I mean, this isn't far removed from Noah. Actually, Noah is still alive this time. Shem for sure. We'll get into that in a second. So there's plenty of people. Abraham gets the covenant, but doesn't mean there weren't people who still worshipped. And maybe they weren't as virtuous as Abram, but they still knew the message and believed in it, and they were good people. And so not all the Amorites were bad. It's just the civilization itself was very corrupt in a lot of these cases. And those that wanted to separate themselves from that did. And like these people, Abner and whoever the other guy was, that has a confederate alliance with Abram. So they acknowledge that they're of this lineage, but that they've separated themselves. So remember that. It's important. There's actually kind of a lot of theologians who this is the story. Like Lot set up camp with good neighbors. With bad neighbors. He went to the city. Not to point fun of cities, but rural living is safer and better usually. And the whole point of this, you want to be aware of who your neighbors are. You want to set up camp with good neighbors, people you can trust. Build a good, strong community, basically, which is what Abram does. He's living rurally off the land, but he does have neighbors, and he makes an alliance with them. They make friendly with one another, and because they have similar cultural understandings and virtues and things like that. Lot did not. Now, he kept his virtues, but he didn't surround himself with people who kept the virtues of the Lord. Okay? I don't think it's that important of a message. Where you go is where you go, especially as Christians. You should not go to the city because it's corrupt. That's where we're meant to go teach and preach, is to the corrupt. I prefer rural living because I'm like it, and I'm kind of selfish that way. All right. So Lot's captured, and somebody escapes of his house and tells Abram that he's captured. Verse 14. And when Abram heard that his brother, it's actually his nephew, but it's just the way it's used here, was taken captive, he armed his trained, so let's look what trained means specifically here instructed. So these guys are trained. They know what they're doing. We'll get into that in a second. His trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. So 318 men of his own house that he's trained, they were born there. So these people who are trained from birth, basically, were they doing this to prepare for battle? Were they doing this to protect, so that they could protect themselves? Either way, they were training and training. Yet there's no other mention of any battle, and there would have been. So this whole time they're not having any battle, but they're well prepared. And that's another lesson to learn. You know, it's a Sermon on the Mount, you know, when Christ says the meek shall inherit the earth. Meek properly translates into basically keep your sword sharpened, but keep it sheathed. You know, that's basically what it means. You want to be prepared, obviously, but you don't want to just use your preparation. You know, the person who carries themselves well, but is also like, oh, dude, that guy's big and strong, and he knows how to fight, don't mess with him. But he wouldn't hurt a fly, yeah, but you don't want to take the chance of him hurting you. It's Teddy Roosevelt, you know, speak softly, carry a big stick. Abram has 318, you know, I'm sure he doesn't have that many people in his household yet. He doesn't even have any of his own kids. He's just been preaching the word of Christ, the word of God, and he's gathered following, and he's got riches, so which means he has animals, which means he can take care of more people, but he needs more people to take care of the animals. And so he has a bunch of people, and he has 318 that have been born there, and they've been training him from birth. More than likely, they're teaching him all kinds of fighting tactics, endurance, weaponry, but also they're probably, you know, they're teaching him the message of the Lord as well. It's fascinating to think about that. You know, we just think of these people as herdsmen, but they had their own little civilization, and they were prepared for battle at all times. Now, they're not going out looking for battle, obviously, but they're training people how to do battle from birth. And we'll see how well they do here. It's quite amazing. But that's something that is such an important lesson. You know, as Christians, you should never seek to do harm or to do battle with someone or to fight or anything like that. Never seek it. But you need to be prepared. You know, you should keep yourself in shape. You know, and I'm not saying you have to train with a sword or even train with a gun or anything like that. But be prepared for things is basically the point of this message. All right. We got to keep going here. Verse 15, and he divided himself, he's got 318 men plus himself, and he divided himself against them, he and his servants by night, and smote them, and pursued them unto Hobah, which is on the left hand of Damascus. So he splits his men up, and he basically pulls a pincer move on them. You know, wait, is that a pincer? Anyway, he comes at them from both sides. And you got to remember, Chad's army thinks they've won the war. They wiped out these kings. Who are these rural farmers, you know, that are about to come attack them? They don't even care about them. They don't live in the city. They're not that wealthy. Whatever. They probably don't even know who these people are. They are probably drunk off of their riches. They're also heavily damaged from battle. They just had a huge battle. So they're weary. Abraham knows this. He takes it to his advantage. By night, he does a nighttime attack with coming at both sides on an army that probably just got done partying because they thought they won the war and they're rich. They took all these riches and slaves and everything. How tactically amazing is that? Now it seems so obvious, but you got to think this is original stuff at the time. Okay, that is genius. Again, it shows Abram still, his shrewdness. We talked about his shrewdness when he went into Egypt, and he tells them that, you know, his beautiful wife is actually his sister, so that they wouldn't kill him, basically. And again, it shows his cleverness. It's his blessing. Okay? He is being watched over, guided by Christ himself, the Lord Almighty. Verse 16, and he brought back all the goods, and also, again, his brother Lot, his nephew, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. So he brings back all the riches, as well as the people, after he just decimates this army at night with a dual attack. Like a Billy badass, man. That's just so cool to me. I'm like, oh, war's a good thing and battle's a good thing. No, it's terrible. It's awful. But that's clever, okay? Just admit that that's a clever move. Verse 17. Here's where stuff really gets interesting. So we're moving away from the battle aspect and the tactical aspect of Abram and all that. This is Melchizedek blesses Abram. Who is Melchizedek? Funny you should ask. Alright, verse 17. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer and of the kings that were with him at the valley of Sheva, which is the king's dale. Alright, so the king of Sodom goes out to meet him. Now this is the new king of Sodom because they just killed the king of Sodom. I mean, they didn't make it clear whether or not he escaped, but if they took all the rich, more than likely the king of Sodom is a new one. Maybe not, but you tend to think it's the new king of Sodom because they just went to battle with the king and decimated their army, basically. Now, some did escape. It said they escaped to the mountains. Who knows? Maybe it is the original king. It's not really that important. Now, remember, this king isn't necessarily a good guy, but he's very powerful. And Abram returns with all of his stuff, basically. Alright, verse 18. Actually, alright, so remember this is Melchizedek blesses Abram. I'll just read it and then we'll get into it. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand, and he gave him tithes of all. Okay, let's rewind. Who is Melchizedek? Well, he's the king of Salem. What is Salem? Salem translates to peace. He is the priest of the Most High God, who brought forth bread and wine to Abram, and then blesses him. There are so many freaking theories to who Melchizedek is. Now, he's mentioned again in Psalms by David and again in Hebrews, just briefly mentioned. It's all about the priest of the order of Melchizedek. Actually, David wasn't only a king, he was a prophet, and he writes that the Messiah would be of the order of the priests of Melchizedek, priesthood of Melchizedek. Okay, so who is this guy? I'm going to tear through the theories and then I'll touch on each one of them. Melchizedek is just Melchizedek, who's a priest of the Most High God. I mean, it's shortly after the flood. They're clearly still believers, and he could have just been the guy worshiping God in the area. So think about the areas where allowing all faiths, and he's the priest of God in this area. Okay, and he's just Melchizedek. Others say that he is Shem, son of Noah. Again, he would still be alive, and he would be priest of the Most High God. In fact, in the book of Jasher, it talks about how Abram went and studied under Noah and Shem, but they talk about it as if Melchizedek is a different guy than Shem. And I think if it was Shem, they would just say it was Shem. They wouldn't say Melchizedek. So I tend not to accept that one too much. In the second book of Enoch, which I don't suggest, and it's first Enoch, great, you can tell this, and second Enoch and third Enoch, you can't verify really at all. They found first Enoch in documents dating hundreds of years before Christ, and first Enoch is referenced throughout the Bible, even in the New Testament. So that one's pretty good. Second and third are pretty, but second's better than third at least. And in that one, it says that he's Noah's nephew, who was basically has a similar story to Christ in that version, and he's born a priest to the Most High God, taken by the Archangel Michael up into heaven to avoid the flood, and then come back down afterwards to be a high priest to the Most High God. Don't really accept that one. So there's this priesthood of Melchizedek, though, that has existed forever. In fact, they came and influenced the Brahman priests of India. They retranslated a lot of the Vedas and made a lot more sense of them basically to this priesthood of Brahman when they talked about a most high God. Like their whole thing was like, instead of this pantheon, there's one true God sort of thing. And that was always their priesthood. And what I tend to think is maybe he studied under Shem. Hebrews makes mention that he has no lineage, basically. He has no father, And in 2nd Enoch, he is born of a virgin, like I said, similar to, but he's born like a grown man sort of thing. Like I said, 2nd Enoch, it's very unconfirmable. And anyway, Hebrew makes mention that he has no father and he's timeless, basically. He has no birth date and he has no death date and all this stuff. So we'll get more into it when we get into that Hebrews a long time from now. But I tend to not get too caught up in who exactly Melchizedek is. Now again, even Christians, this is a common belief among Christians, so if you're not aware of this, a lot of people think Melchizedek is Christ himself, just the way they mention him. He brings them bread and wine, all this stuff. I tend not to think that, and I'll explain why just based on the way it's worded, especially when we get into verse 15 or chapters 15 and 16. Because they would have just said the word of God or something like that. I just think he was a priest, a very knowledgeable person, probably studied under Shem and Noah, who was a priest of the Most High God. It's not like Abram was the only believer. His lineage carried the belief, but even throughout the Bible, there are people who believed in the one true God, pockets of them, who never became a great civilization like the Israelites. So this is probably just the priest, in my opinion, of the Most High God. But we'll get into it more in Hebrews, like I said. But that's not till the New Testament. Maybe we will. Well, just remember this. I'm sorry, I'm getting way caught up on this. But Melchizedek is an important figure, but he's not at the same time. Understand, he's a priest of the Most High God. Bread and wine, which we know comes. David said, for the communion, David said that Christ, the Messiah, would be a priest of the order of Melchizedek. So this is a priesthood older than the Levites who become priests under the Israelites, for the Israelites. So this is even older than that. It is the original message, basically. This was still fresh from Noah, who had it fresh from Enoch, who had it fresh from Seth and Adam. I know I'm skipping people there. But this is the message of God. This is the original priesthood of God. Christ came because he was from the originals. He didn't need to get it from the Levites. The Israelites became corrupted. They used the priesthood as a power symbol. The order of Melchizedek never gained power, but they existed for a long time. Like there's mention of them in multiple cultures. This priesthood of Melchizedek who worshiped the Most High God. And this was the order that Christ was to come from. And I think this is also why he saved the Gentiles. Well, not why, but think about it. He saved the Gentiles. The Jewish people of power, the priesthood class, didn't really like that he was taking their power away. Who's Melchizedek? Who knows? No one knows. Some say he might be one of the two witnesses, but I tend to think that's Enoch and Elijah. Of Revelations, Verse 18. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, which means peace, brought forth wine, and so he blesses him. The only thing I can't figure out is the tithes thing. Does Abram give him tithes, or does Melchizedek give him tithes? We'll see. So it's verse 20 here. It says, and blessed be the Most High God. This is Melchizedek talking. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. I looked it up. I don't know why that bothers me, but who gave tithes? Melchizedek gave tithes? Or Abram gave tithes? It would make sense to Abram, because he just brought back all this blessing. So I'm going to say it was Abram, but they word it better, Verse 22. Oh, wait, no. Let's go back here. Verse 21. Sorry. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, give me the persons and take the goods to thyself. So the king realizes, he's not going to demand anything, and he wants his people. It's very respectable. I gotta give him that. Keep the goods. I'm just giving me back my people. That's fair. I still don't think the king of Sodom is a good guy, though. We make that clear later on. But maybe in his own right, this is why I also think he was a new king. I think he was trying to win over the people, Or he knew he'd be killed if he didn't take the people back. But he's giving Abram offering of the money too, because probably he's probably a little scared of him. His whole army basically got wiped out, and this dude wiped out that army, so he's probably somewhat nervous, And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not shoe latchet, that's funny, sandals, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich. So Abram's humble, first of all. He's humbling himself. He's saying, no, I won't take it. This is good politically, strategically, but I think it's also that he doesn't think about this. He's giving praise to God. He doesn't want it to ever be said that he got his riches from the king of Sodom. He will get his riches and his blessings from the Lord above. And he wants people to know that and see that. Remember, he's preaching the word. He's winning souls this whole time. We don't talk about that very much, but that's what he's doing. He's honoring God and winning souls to his cause. I mean, it happens all the time. Christ said he comes to bring the sword, turn mother against father, father against brother. People probably left their homes and their culture that day when they saw this, when they saw Melchizedek bless him, when they saw Abram and his army save them from being carried away, when they saw him being offered all these riches and he turned them down and gave honor to God. When you see truth, you can't deny it. When you see righteousness and justice and a real leader like that who humbles themselves before God, you're going to win souls. Now, I'm sure the majority of them went back to their home in Sodom, but think about it. There's no way this happened and it didn't make some believers out of some of those people who then maybe they went and were like, hey, Melchizedek, I want to know more about this. He's the priest. They knew them. Like, he's known. He was, I'm guessing, the priest of that area of the order of Melchizedek, where all religions were allowed. So obviously the religion of Noah and Adam is allowed. And he is the priest of it, in that area at least. And he honors him. And Abram, who just destroyed the most powerful army in the area and saved all these people, is honored by that priest, who is the God of the one true God, not the God of all these other religions. And then they see how humble and righteous he is while being a Billy Badass who just saved them from slavery. He won souls that day. Alright. Verse 24, last one. Save only that which the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men which went with me, Aner, Eshel, and Mamre. Let them take their portions. So he only asked for his men to be fed and well sustained. Probably enough food to get home and stuff and to feast that night, sort of thing. So their own provisions. And portions for the Confederate, his neighbors that came with them. Now, I tend to think they took their portions. They would have said, like, we didn't. But maybe, I'm not sure if portions means their own riches, stuff that they are allowed to take, or if it's just portions of food, like his men are getting. Either way, think about this. He just made friends with the king of Sodom. Like, they're not going to attack and destroy him, at least not for a while. He just saved all these people. So he's got friends. He's got people. And the guys that went with him, his neighbors, to help him save his nephew, he made sure they were taken care of before he went home. He didn't take any riches, but he told the king to give portions to the neighbors that went with him. The dude is a strategic genius. I mean, obviously it's from God. That's where revelation and wisdom like this comes from, especially wisdom that comes from righteousness and justice and humility. So he's winning souls, he's by winning battles and making awesome strategic decisions by honoring God. Like, he's honoring God, but look at the strategic position it puts him in. It's genius level. This is going to take care of his family for a few generations, really. I mean, there are tribes that want to wipe them out. They know about the blessing. There's evil, the Rephaim. These people know that they have a blessing. They're going to find out about it. We'll see that people find out about this blessing and it causes strife that Abram gets because he gets the land. You know, and you could say, oh, it's not fair. Think about it. He's coming into the land. The people who hate him the most just get wiped out by this king, and that king takes a bunch of slaves with him. He goes and wipes out that king and saves all these slaves. So his main enemies were just the people who destroyed his main enemies. He goes in and makes friends with everyone because he saves the land, basically. He didn't just conquer the land. He won the hearts and souls of the people of the land. It's amazing. Because what you got to understand about the Israelites, the original Jewish people, yes, it's Abraham's seed that becomes a blessing. That is the fact. He has people, think about it, he had 318 trained men. Do you think he's not sharing the message of God with those people? Do you think that those people don't get to be saved in the end of the days? I mean, you think that it's only Abram's seed that knew the message? He's gaining a following of people who will then send it to their children. And they may not be as blessed as Abram's, obviously. But if just one person in each generation keeps sending it to one person down the line in those families, this is why he's a blessing unto the world. It says he'll be a priest unto the world. He'll be a blessing to all the families of the world. So it's not just the Jewish Abraham line that is knowing and understanding the message. Everyone's understanding the message. This is why it gets so messed up with the bloodlines. The bloodlines are so important because that's what fulfills prophecy. Like, if you make a prophecy about someone being born and you don't really give their lineage, it dilutes the prophecy. I mean, it's still an amazing prophecy, but think about how exact it is if you're like, that specific guy's lineage will do these things. Why that guy? Because I know that guy, and I know what will happen, and I know all. That's amazing. That's what the bloodlines are important for. It's not important for who are the only ones that know the message. Abraham, the order of Melchizedek, priest of the Most High, people are being saved with the message of Christ before Christ even came. Because the Word of God is Christ. They knew the message of Christ from the very beginning. The order of Melchizedek knew the message of Christ. It wasn't an original thing when Christ brought it. It was reintroduced, basically. But even he said he didn't come to abolish the laws and commandments. He came to fulfill them. This is the fulfillment of the message. Love God above all else. Love your neighbor as yourself. Accept that your Creator above loves and will protect you. It's not just Abraham's line. Abraham's line is the story that we follow, and they carry the main message. But like I said, 318 men he had before he went and got ordained basically by the priest, high priest of the Most High God, Melchizedek. Before all his people saw what he did. The message is being spread. Even when the Israelites come along, it's not just them that knew the message of Christ, okay? And it's not just them that were saved. Other people knew it. Other people heard it. It was carried through the Israelites, the true knowledge and recorded knowledge. But the Spirit of Christ has been spread to many different people. I'm not saying that every religion is Christ-like or something like that. I'm saying that the message of Christ was spread through many people, even before Christ, even among people who were not of Abraham's line. And the Bible's clear about that. It's so clear about that. Alright, that's Genesis 14. God bless, and everybody have a wonderful day, evening, I'm not sure.